So there's this thing, it's been floating around for quite a while. Self-care. Never really looked that much into it. I didn't really think it was anything that really interested me, other than the obvious fact that yes, you should take care of yourself. I've always been a little bit skeptical about the whole self-care craze. It's like you always hear messages like it's work, something you really have to put effort in, to eat that chocolate cake because you really deserve it, or take a bubble bath. Like, it seemed preposterous, the amount of freaking effort and money people are willing to put into self-care. The self-care industry is $450 billion of like bath bombs and face masks and massagers and crystals and Gwyneth Paltrow's vaginal candle. And then now that I think about it more, it's like women are bigger advocates for this than men are. Like, you rarely hear a guy talking about how they took a bubble bath or they ate a piece of chocolate cake because they're practicing self-care, or putting on their story 10 ways to alleviate stress this month, or make sure you love yourself. Like, those are all things that women do. And like, not that those are wrong, those are actually good things to do, but it's just, there's a clear disconnect. After thinking about my conceptions or misconceptions about self-care, I decided to do a little research about it. And now I hate it even more. Okay, I don't hate everything, but there's a lot that goes on with it. There's a lot of good, but there's a whole lot of bad. So how about I just share what I learned? Well, what is self-care? Good question. Self-care is a movement that has its origins all the way back to Socrates. Socrates was a man who believed that we as human beings should question everything to get closer to the truth. He also hated democracy and thought we were too stupid for ruling ourselves, having a say, personal opinion over our government. But I'm not trying to get political here. Is that even political? That's like, could be. Socrates' teachings on improving thyself wasn't just a way to improve yourself, but to also improve your community. Socrates' care of self was centered around three important principles, and these were your relationships with people, behaving in a way that aligns with who you truly are, and treating yourself with the attention, kindness, and respect you deserve. And I think people just disregard the first two lessons and just go with the third and like, oh, it's self-care. Love yourself. Okay, well, let's actually internalize these lessons for a second. Having better relationships with people will just help you as well as the other people and keep you guys healthier and happier. Behaving in the way that you truly are is authenticity. People love authenticity. It helps them know that they're talking to a real person. Treating yourself with the kindness and respect you deserve is important, because if you don't, then you're just gonna have to get that from everybody else and put the burden on them, and you can't love anybody if you don't love yourself. Ever heard of that quote? Also, knowing yourself will help you determine what influences are good and what influences are bad, so that you're not just like pulled in a million different directions by a million different types of advice. So, pretty based, right? Socrates got a lot right. Is there anything more recent? Of course there is. The actual term self-care, as it is called today, became an official medical concept in the 1950s. After that, in the 1960s, during the Civil Rights passage, demonstrators began to experience burnout from the long days of protesting and demonstrating that self-care was popularized during that time. Because of segregation that caused unequal access to medical services and information, they were like, let's take this into our own hands and find ways to keep themselves healthy in their struggle for equality. Okay, but what is self-care like today? Well, it's kind of complicated, but I'll get into it. You guys are probably already doing some kind of self-care, just not labeling it like self-care, especially if you're into things like self-improvement or productivity. Self-care has some good sides as well as some ugly sides, but I'm going to start with the good sides first. Let's start with sleep. It's actually super nice to see people talk about sleep now and talking about how important it is, because for the longest time, I thought sleep was just for the weak. I thought the less sleep you get, the more time to be productive. So there's this particular Arnold Schwarzenegger video that you've probably seen, basically where he says to an audience of people, like, you only need 6 hours of sleep, and if you can't get that, just sleep faster. Because all these successful people, like The Rock, like Obama, like Trump, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, they only need 5 to 6 hours of sleep. So I wanted to do that. I wanted to be them. And I basically did that. Like, I tried for 2 weeks, sleeping only 6 hours, including weekends. My mood was actually not that bad, but my IQ dropped like 50 points. Also, here's the worst part about it. I was going to the gym every single day and making no gains. And we can't have that. I actually just watched a video pretty recently about sleep from Alex Ramosi. He's a very productive guy and makes a lot of money. That means what he says is important. I'll link it down for you guys if you want it. Basically, his video was about all of his tips and tricks on how to actually sleep more and get better sleep. Exercise is a big one. Like, it's the best de-stressor, or at least in my opinion. If you're burnt out for the week, if you exercise daily, you won't be as burnt out. Meditation is good for lowering your stress if you're extremely stressed out and burnt out from the week. I'm gonna see you guys in a bit, and I'm gonna talk about the ugly. Okay. Back in the car. I got a little time before the sunset starts, so I thought might as well come back in the car and finish some of the video. So I read this article. It was on Maria Shriver's newsletter, who happens to be Arnold Schwarzenegger's ex, but who cares? It was by Dr. Samantha Boardman. Basically, the article was about a woman named Margot, who recently gone to a self-care seminar called Make This Year All About You. Basically, what she was asked to do every day was look at the mirror and ask herself, what do I need today? She was told to make regular dates for herself and treat herself to her favorite slice of pie. After this seminar, she started implementing these things. Instead of participating in her weekly book clubs with her friends, she instead started to read alone books she was actually interested in. Instead of seeing her grandmother on vacation like she thought she would, instead she just went somewhere else and went to someplace she actually wanted to. She even declined a birthday invitation from her friend because the party wasn't held at a vegan restaurant. Margaret was totally implemented all the things that she learned at this seminar, and she did see some positives, of course. She was getting tons of sleep, exercising a ton. She was reading all these books. She was meeting with a life coach every 2 weeks and meditating. And despite all of these positives, she was left feeling kind of hollow inside. The positive feelings quickly faded away and were replaced by guilt, sadness, loneliness, and self-immersion. And that's when it becomes apparent. A lot of this self-care stuff we keep hearing about is kind of bullshit, or at least the way it's marketed. In an age where people are lonelier, depressed, and having less meaningful relationships, I think making this year about you is probably the last thing they need to hear. Despite how important some of these things in self-care actually are. Dr. Samantha Boardman instead talks about 3 principles that she thinks is better than the ones heard in self-care. 1, do something nice for someone. Doing something nice for someone else is far more rewarding than doing something for yourself. Jumping in and doing things for others is one of the most effective antidotes for relieving stress. Have a time feast. It's been shown that people's subjective sense of having time actually increases when it's spent on others. 3, forget the mask metaphor. Well, what is the mask metaphor? Well, basically, the premise is if you're on an airplane and we're all going to die, go get your oxygen mask first. Now, I'm not saying don't save yourself first, but too much self-focus on yourself is really, really bad for you, and probably not going to be happy doing it. It was a cool shot.